Well, I promised while I was in Western Australia that I'd hopefully get a chance to talk to someone at the Department of Ministry of Health. And Dr. Simon Towler, thank you very much indeed. You've been put forward to talk to us about this. I'm giving you a bit of background. The Isle of Man is looking at this.
Yes.
It appears to be sort of parked. They put it towards Timor, but it's probably going to become an election issue anyway. But you're fresh on this. I mean, it's just December the legislation went through here. But it's been a long journey, has it not? And this report, can we just see the size of this report? That's just enormous. That's the work that's gone into this.
It's been a very long journey, and even if you talk about the journey of this particular piece of legislation, there have been multiple previous private members' bills in Western Australia dating back to the 1990s, raising the issue of some form of voluntary assisted dying. But as you rightly pointed out, the thing that's been really different this time are two things. This report from a multi-party parliamentary committee established when the current Labor government came to power, when they had been challenged by the community to revisit this really important conversation. It interviewed many people, over 800 submissions, and came to a view that it was time for the government to look more seriously at voluntary assisted dying. Obviously, the context in Australia was also that this was all occurring just as the voluntary assisted dying legislation in Victoria had passed in Parliament, and in fact, as this work was coming to fruition, the laws in Victoria became operational, which was June last year.
Did you both come to the same sort of conclusions, or are you looking at this kind of different ways?
The Victorians were essentially a year and a half to 2 years in advance of where Western Australia was. What it did mean, though, that the Western Australian process was strongly informed by the issues that occur in Australia. And voluntary assisted dying in Australia can only exist under specific statute. We do not have a national Bill of Rights. You cannot follow the model that happened in Canada, where the famous Carter versus the Supreme Court resulted in an opinion from the Supreme Court in Canada that people had the right to access voluntary assisted dying, and in fact instructed the Canadian provinces to introduce laws to make it possible, which resulted in the medical assistance in dying legislation across the Canadian provinces. A very, very different story. Australia is federated. Each state has its own legislation. The law must be by jurisdiction, and in Australia the Victorians, although the Northern Territory had the first legislation.
But it got booted out, didn't it?
It did. Well, booted out. We don't like to talk about the Commonwealth government as booting things out, but the territory is under the auspices of the Commonwealth government as a Commonwealth territory, and the Commonwealth territory overturned the laws which were created by and passed by the Parliament in the territory.
Okay, let's deal with WA then.
Yes.
Western Australia. It's on the statute books, but it's not coming in for another 18 months. What's that about, first of all?
So exactly the same way in which Victoria, people recognise that there's a very substantial body of work that's required to be done to introduce processes and systems and to support safeguards and give people confidence that this is operating with respect for individuals, respect for practitioners, and the methods that have been endorsed in the law are in place. It is a substantial amount of work. And in fact, I was on the ministerial expert panel. There was some suggestion that perhaps we should shorten the implementation period. We believe that 18 months is the absolute minimum, and I can point to you for this. This is the first report that's just come out from the Victorian VAD board, talking about their first 6 months of work, which really predated the laws being fully proclaimed and people having access to VAD. And it is very apparent from that work that an enormous body of work needs to be done around the VAD board, the processes and support, the critical elements of education for medical practitioners, the opportunity to create a system where patients can find information, be supported if they wish to follow this pathway, to have a safe environment for the use of the pharmaceuticals.
Very importantly, this is not anyone that just wants to end their life at any time. It's in the last 6 months and getting it signed off by more than one doctor, right? I mean, this is just an early termination when you're going anyway.
The eligibility issues sit at the core of it. So in Western Australia, as it is in Victoria, you have to be over 18 years of age. You have to have been diagnosed with a condition which will result in your death, which in the opinion of good medical advice, if it is not a neurological disorder, it is expected that you will die within 6 months. if it's a neurological condition, and obviously people think a lot about conditions like motor neuron disease, severe multiple sclerosis, there is an allowance that people with those advanced neuromuscular disorders, the period can be 12 months instead of 6 months. That exactly mimics the Victorian legislation. And that is, you have to have those conditions, and in addition to that, you have to be suffering in a way which cannot be satisfactorily managed to the person's individual position before you can access VOD.
Okay. But we know that when end of life is imminent, you maybe be given a bit more morphine or something like that. I mean, it's obvious. Clearly, you can't officially. Or in the past, you probably couldn't officially do it. I don't know how it works now,
but you can officially. I mean, the double effect is well understood and is not prohibited at law. Clinicians have been able to, with good intent, provide surety that patients are not suffering and in distress. That it is no doubt, and it's accepted and it's extensively discussed in this document, this double effect, where the purpose of giving morphine is actually to relieve suffering and pain. It is understood that in some cases that will bring on death a little sooner. Right. But it has not been legal to specifically, for example, overdose somebody with the intent specifically of making their life end.
Okay, we've got lots more to talk about. We'll have a part 2 of this.